Imagine you're making your morning coffee. You tear open a packet of sugar, scoop out a small spoonful, stir it into the cup, and within seconds it disappears. The crystals melt without a trace, becoming just another ordinary part of your day. You barely notice the action. It's so common that it feels almost meaningless, but that tiny spoonful is connected to one of the oldest stories your body has ever known. Long before cities existed, before farming, before humans even walked the earth, something inside your ancestors was already searching for sweetness. The desire for sugar didn't begin with candy factories, desserts, or even the first farmers. It began tens of millions of years ago in a world that looked nothing like the one we know today. To understand why sugar has such a powerful hold on us, we have to travel back to a forgotten earth. Not thousands of years, not hundreds of thousands, but nearly 40 million years ago. At that time, northern Africa wasn't covered by endless deserts. The Sahara as we know it didn't yet exist. Instead, much of the region was filled with warm, humid forests stretching across the landscape. Thick trees formed a dense canopy overhead, while vines and flowering plants covered the forest floor. Hidden among those branches lived small primates, the distant ancestors of every monkey, ape, and eventually every human being alive today. These creatures weren't human, they weren't even close. They had small brains, long tails, and bodies perfectly adapted for climbing trees. Yet inside them were the first building blocks of instincts that still shape our lives today. Every day presented the same challenge: find enough food before something else did. Life in those ancient forests was anything but easy. Food wasn't stored, nothing could be refrigerated. There were no farms, no supermarkets, and certainly no guarantee that tomorrow would provide another meal. Every sunrise began a race for survival. Some foods offered safety but demanded effort. Hard seeds, nuts protected by thick shells, fibrous plants that required strong jaws and long hours of chewing. Other foods were completely different. Bright, ripe fruits hung from tree branches for only a short period each year. They were soft, easy to eat, packed with natural sugars that could be converted into energy almost immediately. For an animal living one meal at a time, those sweet fruits were incredibly valuable. A single ripe fruit could provide fast energy for climbing, escaping predators, finding mates, or traveling long distances in search of more food. But there was a catch. Everyone wanted them. Birds, bats, insects, other primates, even larger mammals competed for exactly the same reward. When fruit became ripe, the competition began immediately. Wait too long, and the opportunity disappeared. Natural selection quietly rewarded the animals that could recognize sweetness quickly. Those individuals were more likely to locate ripe fruit before competitors. They gained more calories, produced healthier offspring, and passed those preferences to future generations, generation after generation, across millions of years. The attraction to sweetness became deeply embedded inside the primate brain. It wasn't simply a preference anymore. It became a survival tool. The sweeter something tasted, the more valuable it usually was. That simple relationship shaped evolution itself. But how do scientists know any of this? After all, no one was there to watch these ancient primates eating fruit. The answer lies in something surprisingly durable: teeth. Unlike soft tissue, teeth can survive for tens of millions of years buried underground. They preserve tiny details of an animal's life that bones alone cannot reveal. Every bite leaves evidence. Hard foods create microscopic chips and fractures. Soft foods wear enamel differently. Sugary diets encourage cavities because bacteria feed on leftover sugars inside the mouth. Over an entire lifetime, teeth become biological diaries. They silently record what an animal actually ate, not what researchers imagine it ate. And unlike stories or legends, fossils don't exaggerate. One of the world's richest fossil sites sits inside Egypt's Fayum Depression. Today it appears dry and barren, But millions of years ago, it was an enormous tropical ecosystem filled with rivers, forests, crocodiles, giant birds, early elephants, and countless species of primates. For decades, paleontologists have recovered extraordinary fossils from this region. Among them were hundreds of remarkably preserved primate teeth dating between roughly 29 and 40 million years ago. These fossils offered researchers a rare opportunity. Could they reconstruct the diets of humanity's earliest relatives? Could tiny pieces of enamel reveal why humans love sweetness today? To answer those questions, an international research team carefully examined hundreds of fossil teeth using high-resolution imaging and microscopic analysis. They weren't searching for dramatic discoveries. Instead, they looked for two simple clues. How often were the teeth chipped? And how often did they contain cavities? The answers would reveal whether these animals mostly crushed hard foods or regularly consumed soft, sugar-rich fruit. What they found would completely reshape our understanding of one of humanity's oldest cravings. The results surprised even the researchers. Out of 421 fossilized teeth belonging to 5 different species of early anthropoids, the evolutionary group that eventually gave rise to every monkey, ape, and human alive today, only a tiny percentage showed signs of heavy chipping. If these animals had regularly cracked open hard nuts or crushed tough seeds, their teeth should have been covered with fractures. But they weren't. Instead, the enamel remained remarkably intact. Even more revealing was something else hidden inside those ancient teeth. Small cavities. Not many, but enough to tell an important story. In modern primates, cavities are strongly associated with diets rich in soft, sugary fruits. Bacteria living in the mouth feed on natural sugars, producing acids that slowly erode tooth enamel. Exactly the same process was happening nearly 30 to 40 million years ago. That meant these ancient primates weren't simply eating fruit whenever it happened to be available. They appeared to actively seek it. The evidence pointed toward a clear dietary preference: soft, sweet, energy-rich fruit. This might seem like a small scientific discovery. After all, who cares what a tiny primate ate millions of years ago? But this finding reaches much farther than paleontology. It reaches into your own mouth. Hidden inside every human tongue are tiny sensory structures called taste buds. Each contains specialized receptors designed to detect sweetness with remarkable sensitivity. One of the most important is produced by a gene known as TAS1R2, working together with its partner TAS1R3. Together, these receptors act like molecular locks. Whenever natural sugars enter your mouth, they fit these receptors almost perfectly, triggering signals that race toward your brain in a fraction of a second. Your brain immediately recognizes the message: this food contains quick energy. That response isn't something humans invented, it's inherited. Every time you enjoy the sweetness of fruit, honey, or even a dessert, you're activating a biological system that has been refined over tens of millions of years. In evolutionary terms, sweetness became a shortcut. Instead of analyzing the nutritional value of every piece of food, the brain learned a much simpler rule. Sweet usually means calories, calories usually mean survival, so sweetness became rewarding. Modern neuroscience helps explain just how powerful this reward really is. When sweet food touches your tongue, the brain doesn't simply recognize the taste. It also activates parts of the reward system that release chemicals such as dopamine, creating feelings of pleasure and motivation. This isn't a design flaw, it's an evolutionary feature. Imagine an animal living in a forest where food is unpredictable. If finding ripe fruit felt especially satisfying, that animal would naturally search for it again. The more often it found fruit, the greater its chances of surviving long enough to reproduce. Over countless generations, evolution favored brains that treated sweetness as something valuable. The craving wasn't irrational, it was incredibly useful. This challenges one of the most common assumptions people make about human evolution. We often imagine our distant ancestors as fearless hunters living almost entirely on meat. Movies portray prehistoric humans carrying spears, chasing mammoths, and surviving through brute strength. Reality was far more complicated. For much of primate evolution, meat played only a limited role. Long before organized hunting became common, forests supplied fruits, leaves, flowers, insects, and occasional small animals. Fruit was especially attractive because it delivered energy almost instantly. Unlike fibrous plants that required hours of digestion, natural sugars could quickly fuel movement and brain activity.